It shocks me how people just have that build it and they will come mentality. I think it's foolish and it's detrimental to your success, because I don't care what kind of business you have, what kind of product, what kind of service, there are 100 other people probably within 5 miles of you doing exactly the same thing.
This is Brent Richardson, and welcome to the Business Minutia Podcast, where our focus is on the details of business that are often passed over by traditional classes, leadership training. We focus on the stories of real people who have tried, failed, and learned through their experiences and are willing to share their lessons with others.
One of the biggest differences between TV when we were little and TV now is we have a little timer in the upper left-hand corner that lets you know exactly how long these ads are going to last before your show starts again. And you get up and you walk away. Not the same thing on social media. These ads are thrown in to where it looks like it's just part of your regular news feed. It's
Sometimes
crazy.
It's hard to tell, right? And the classic story and example that I've given with people here, it's funny. I'm scrolling through Amazon one time, and it's like, hey, you want to buy a horse head mask? And I'm like, what the crap? Why do I need a... Yeah, I'd like to have a horse head.
And now we own a horse head mask.
And a Donald Trump mask, and a unicorn mask, and a duck mask.
But it's beautiful because it's not limited to Amazon. Anybody can get on social media.
Yeah.
And
It's ability to tailor your advertising needs to the audience. Finding your audience is really what it's good at. Once you know who your audience is, it can drop it in right in front of the right people. It's a little scary, but powerful as a business owner.
And we're getting a little bit better at this just because of the time and effort and research that we've used to get better at this. But in reality, there are people out there that know a whole lot more about it.
And we wanted to bring in somebody that's a professional at this to give some wisdom and advice. And so we brought in Cynthia Smoot with Gangway Advertising.
And she has a lot of big names under her belt. And even Fletcher's Corny Dogs, that's how we originally got connected with her. Would highly encourage, if you have interest in getting to know more about social media and how to use it effectively, and if you own a small business, you should be interested in this.
Well, I think before you can market your service, you have to first determine who you are as a brand. In fact, one of the things that we tell clients when we first start working with them is, especially on social media, for most people, it's not their face that they're promoting. It's usually a logo,
Right.
Or photos of their service or their product. And so you have to humanize that. So I'll say to people, if your brand was a person, are they male or female? Are they young or old? Are they serious and intellectual? Or are they quirky and funny? I think you have to determine what your voice is and humanize it, because that is how you will engage with people, and it sets the tone for how you construct your messaging.
Okay. And so having a general target audience and what your audience is really looks like or thinks like, and how you would appeal to them, and thinking about that when you're developing your brand from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, and even if you're a restaurant and, you might say, well, my target's anyone who eats, like I'm serving great food. I get that, but it's still, are you a high-end steakhouse that you want to be more polished and sophisticated in your verbiage and your tone? Right. Or are you just a hamburger joint and you can be more casual and conversational? So I think it's really just reflecting your brand values.
Yeah. And when you start with that, it filters all through the material and the media that you start to put together, because the example you give is really good. A really high-end steakhouse using like a font that looks like crayons done by an 8-year-old, it's probably not going to appeal to your client, to your clientele. And so you're going to think a little bit differently about that. So it's a really good point. Have you found, or do you observe with the changes in how people market, with the growth of social media in the last 10 to 15 years, do you see that affecting how people are branding or rebranding their material that they already have?
I don't know that it's affecting how people are branding themselves. I just think it is changing how they communicate with their customer base.
Okay. So in what way? Give me an example.
Well, I think, a high-end restaurant 15 years ago would have had to rely on advertisements in maybe glossy monthly magazines or direct mailers, possibly radio ads, versus today you can be more direct and time sensitive through social media.
Okay.
And email marketing.
Okay. Sure. And so that kind of gets into the social media side. With initially we're just talking about Facebook, right? And I think when I first saw Facebook, I thought, oh, it's great. You can show pictures to mom, and you can connect with people you hadn't connected with for years. But you look at what's out there today, and I mean, it's a huge. I didn't see it certainly as a marketing opportunity. But you look at it today, and it's a huge marketing opportunity for businesses. I don't know that there's a better way for them to go really zoom in and see. And we've used this for the podcast a few times when we had, big guests that was where it was worth it to go and invest a little bit. And then you really see what the capabilities are. You can really hone in on your target audience and in ways that you would never have been able to do prior to the social media existing. What do you guys do? Do you have a recommendation, or what kind of patterns can you share with business owners in terms of one platform versus another, or anything like that?
Well, I think the first thing that I tell people is there's not enough time in the day for you to be everywhere. So you really want to pick the platforms where the most people are. And when I say the most people, I mean your customers. Yeah. So for instance, as a user, I might love Pinterest because I like to go there for recipes, or I'm redecorating my house and I can really find great inspirational, home decor looks. But it may not be appropriate for my business. So you have to really separate what you enjoy using as a, personal consumer versus where are my customers? Yeah. And because that, if I am, like, let's say that I'm a C-level recruiter, you need to be on LinkedIn. Yeah. So it just completely depends on what is your business or service, and then what is the most appropriate. Now, the sort of catch-all to start with, I always say if you're going to pick one thing to start with and just start learning social media and get comfortable with it, start with Facebook. It's the largest platform, reaches the most people. It's what people are comfortable with from a user standpoint. So it's an easy place to start. And then once you feel comfortable there and you've kind of grown a base, then maybe add Instagram or start working LinkedIn, which is a very different voice. So, again, I think if you are a B2B business, I would say LinkedIn is probably where I would encourage you to start. If you're B2C, I would say Facebook.
Yeah. I think that was the part that surprised me a little bit when we started the podcast, was we knew we needed to have a social media presence, even though I'm not a huge social media fan. I've always been in and around it, but it's almost like you mentioned, my interest in Pinterest or some other Reddit or any of the other things where I might browse for entertainment is very different when it comes from a business perspective where you're talking about marketing. So we kind of got involved in Facebook, and I think we even started Twitter and realized, all right, this is not our space. That's not going to be a big payoff for us, and it will consume all of your time. It will consume every ounce that you've got to give. The one area I think we kind of were thinking that might be beneficial that we really didn't plan much for has proven to be the most impactful for us was LinkedIn, because it fits for our pod. It fits for our audience and the people who are interested in the kind of content. It's where they are. So finding the ways to go engage in the right space, that makes good sense. So are there some spaces that you look at Facebook and say, well, let's just say it this way. I don't know another way to say it. There's a perception from some people that, the certain age group is using this platform, and there's other age groups that are using other platforms. Do you guys break it down like that? Where you'd say, okay, this audience over here, if you've got clients that really don't know, and that you break it out in a way to try to go find where their target audience might be?
Well, most businesses aren't so niche that their consumer base is, a 10-year span. Like, we reach 20 to 25-year-olds and that's it. I mean, there are very few of those services. So for the most part, I mean, there are definitely platforms that skew younger. TikTok
Yeah.
would skew more teen into early 20s versus Facebook is more 40 plus. So it just really depends on, what is your sweet spot and where can you cast the widest net. So, there's overlap in all of these. And that's why I say Facebook, I think, is a great place to start. Primarily because if you're looking for a 25 plus audience, it's just kind of a good baseline to start with. But again, if you're a sporting goods company and you're targeting teens or young adults, then Facebook probably isn't going to be the best place for you unless you're really targeting their parents because they buy the product. So again, it's really who is your consumer, but then really who is the purchaser of your products is another thing you have to think about.
Right. And it goes back to opening with your brand statement. Not just your brand, but what is your business model? Who are you targeting? Who are you after? Finding out where your customers exist, where do they want to find out about your material and whatever you're producing? Which brings me to another question, which is, do you see a distinction between products versus services when it comes to marketing in any one platform versus another?
Not really. You're still marketing the same way. Whether you're, promoting a product like shoes, or a service like shoe repair, right?
Sure.
It's still you're focused on an audience and you're trying to get your message across.
Sure. Do you recommend people, I heard early on when we first opened our business that you should focus on two only, or focus on just one or two versus there's so many, like we've talked about Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and YouTube and Twitter and TikTok and LinkedIn, and they consume your time, right? And at first I thought, come on, two doesn't make sense. And so we opened, 4 or 5. And I realized pretty quickly, I don't have bandwidth for this, right? I just don't have the time for it. And so I had to start cutting things.
You know what? And I'm happy about that because that's how I stay in business.
That's right. I remember thinking, you know what? If this grows beyond that, I will have to contact somebody, and then that's a good problem to have, right? So do you guys recommend that, or do you see a need for it for companies, or do you just say wherever you can find the market, you should attack?
Well, I think you have to. I think you need to play in the space to figure out where you're going to get the best return, right? So like you said, you started on Twitter and then you kind of figured out, my people are not here. And so maybe you just want to set up your Facebook post to automatically roll to Twitter. So there's still content going there, but you're not really spending time there. But if somebody trips across it, doesn't hurt anything. It's another place for you to be. So there are sort of shortcuts like that where you can sort of cross promote the channels, where you're posting and then it's just rolling to 2 or 3 places. So yeah, I think you probably hear that 2-platform rule for that reason, right? Especially when you're starting out, you've got to figure out, because all of these channels work a little bit differently as well. They, some use, like Twitter and Instagram are heavy users of hashtags. Facebook is not. So it's like you don't just want to copy and paste on 4 or 5 channels because they don't all work the same. And so you have to take that message and tweak it to fit that platform to get the best result. And so it takes time to do so. And again, like you said, you're just going to get better results from some channels than others. So you find out pretty quickly what makes sense for you to spend time on and what does not.
Yeah, your comment on that hashtags were going to be my next thing to ask about for that reason, because I think there are services out there that I can publish and say, okay, here's my content that I want published, and I just want it broadcast out to, and it can distribute to these different platforms. The problem I found with that is exactly what you've mentioned. Is on Instagram, there's a certain type of content that I want to put out there that I get that I've observed I get more reaction from. And the same, if I publish the same on Facebook, I don't get the same reactions. And the recommendation for hashtags on Instagram is, endless. Use 20 hashtags. And then on Facebook, maybe 1 or 2.
Right.
LinkedIn's kind of the same. Any advice you can give to people around hashtags and the use of them. And then I think you already answered my other question, which is different content for those different platforms.
So to address hashtags, it's really for people who don't know what a hashtag is, it's really a way to filter a conversation. So hashtags started becoming popular at uses at like conventions. So let's say you went to a sports convention. Or for your business. And so using a hashtag is a way for people to follow a conversation. So if you went to the, you're in Las Vegas and you're going to a social media summit expo for 3 days. And so that expo is going to come up with a hashtag, right? Like hashtag LV Expo. Right. So you would use that in all of your posts while you're there that weekend, but it's also a way for you to follow along in the conversation from the 10,000 other people who are there and see what other people are saying and be like, oh, well, I thought I wanted to go to this seminar, but I'm hearing a lot of people say that this other one was excellent, so I'm going to switch gears. So it's a way for you to sort of streamline the information that's happening about 900,000 conversations and say, well, I just want to hear about this topic. Yeah. Twitter is amazing from the perspective that it's almost like a ticker tape of information. So it's really where you can find out the latest breaking news about if there's a plane that goes down, if there's an athlete who announces his retirement. Twitter is always the first place I go. They're going to have the most information before it can even get to television or radio. Right. You're going to see it on Twitter. And so if you want to know what's happening, if there is a crisis or an earthquake or the president gets shot or anything like that, go to Twitter. That's where you're going to find it. And it's probably going to be from a hashtag. Yeah.
And these hashtags create these kind of virtual communities, I find as well, where there's hashtags I'll use that have where there are consistent groups of people that follow those. There's hashtags that I will follow as well. If it's the right topic, making brisket or barbecue or something like that, and I'll follow those hashtags because I'm always seeing real authentic posts from people,
exactly.
Information, and then you're learning things.
Well, and that's what I mean by filtering the conversation. Right. It allows you to follow a community, right? So
right.
Using barbecue as an example, if you're a guy who, you're totally into it and you like finding out tips and tricks and kind of like who are the stars in this field and, who's new on the scene and whatnot, what's the latest, toys coming out to help you, make a better ribs or whatever. You can follow hashtags, hashtag barbecue, hashtag, smoke, whatever those things are. And again, just filter that conversation to streamline the information that you are interested in or to connect to that community that you want to be a part of. And so it's a way for you to not only follow information, but it's a way for you to get people to your stream so that they find you. So if I was an interior decorator and I'm posting photos of the home renovations that I'm doing, so let's say that I redid a kitchen, I would be, hashtag kitchen, hashtag, kitchen redo, hashtag black and white, hashtag, it's like all of these little things like home decor. Right. So, and you can kind of go to, who are some of the stars in your field and see what hashtags they're using as a good shortcut. So whatever the pros are using, steal them, start using them.
Absolutely. Any tips and tricks in terms of using hashtags? One of the things that I've noticed is some hashtags will have these little virtual communities that will be in the millions, and my posts are white noise and they just vanish very quickly. And then there's others that have 200. Well, that's a pretty small pond to fish in, right? So.
Well, but I will say you have to think also, so if let's say you're on Instagram and you're a podcaster, you want people to find your podcast. So I'm sure one of the hashtags that you're using is hashtag podcast. Well, guess what? So are the million other people who are doing a podcast. So unless you already have a large audience and you're attracting a lot of likes and engagement, you're not going to be seen on that discover field. So if I click on hashtag podcast, your audience isn't big enough that you're ever going to show up there because there are 2 million people using that hashtag. Exactly. So sometimes it is actually better to think, okay, well, yes, I am a podcast, but I am a business podcast. Right. I am a local business podcast. I am so it's like kind of don't take it from that generic hashtag and sort of bring it down a couple of notches to make it really specific for your business. Yes, there is a smaller pond to fish in, as you said, but sometimes it's better to be a big fish in a small pond than a minnow in the ocean.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've observed the same as if you can find the right ponds, the right virtual communities with the right size, and then you get some return on that investment, right?
Right.
So this is when we're just posting and, putting content out there, which, some business users are doing that on their own and doing that themselves. But then eventually you'll get into the concept of advertising with these folks, right? And I noticed it right away with Facebook. They're all over me all the time about advertising. They're hitting me with tons of tools and information, and I'm almost like, it's too much. Back off. I would post something and they'd be back on me immediately saying, hey, you could reach so many thousands of people if you'd give us, X dollars. And I had to do some research on my own about this, which was like, all right, when is this valuable? When does it make sense? And I went through and played with it just to get the experience. But do you guys have any recommendations for folks in terms of, is there a certain amount that you shouldn't be, investing in advertising in Facebook for $5? But at the same time, is there an amount where you're like, yeah, that's probably too much when you're just sticking your toe in the water to learn?
Well, I will say this. There is no better place for a small business to advertise than on social media, because it allows you to get so granular in who it is you're trying to reach. Where else could you advertise for $10 or $25?
Yeah.
Nowhere.
Right.
Not radio,
Right.
not TV,
Right.
not magazines, not newspapers. Nowhere, literally nowhere could you spend $25 and advertise to a targeted customer. So if I'm a restaurant in downtown McKinney, Texas, I can literally say, I want to reach people within a 5-mile radius of my location.
Right. Right.
And I want to reach women who are between 40 and 65 who have kids.
Yeah.
Where else can you do that?
Right.
So I think social media is the best place to advertise because, number one, it doesn't take a lot of money, but number two, it just allows you to be super particular about your audience and who you are targeting. Because sometimes you may be targeting, you're like, again, I'm a restaurant. I just want people who eat. I want the whole city of Dallas to know I'm here. And sometimes you may be advertising a date night or a brunch or, so there are certain times where maybe you want your audience to be more male than female. Maybe it's a cigar night. You're doing a cigar and poker event. Well, that would be geared more towards men. So an ad in D magazine doesn't give you that flexibility. Sure. They're like, well, we got 100,000 copies and that's who they hit.
Yeah.
So, it really is amazing in that sense that it's available to any budget. And it allows you to be very particular. And then as you start to play with it and experiment, you will kind of figure out, what works for you. Is it picking those, certain interest? Is it a certain age? I mean, you can kind of, it's not a huge investment to play around with it so that you can kind of figure out what you're comfortable with and what works for you.
And then monitoring the effectiveness of it, right? So how do you guys recommend that in terms of the effectiveness of what the return on the investment is for the advertising in general? Any rule of thumb?
Well, I think, the other great thing is they give you great reporting. So you can see, I spent $25. I posted about this new brunch we were launching this weekend. We spent $25. We wanted to reach people in our neighborhood. And Facebook will show you, here's how many people it reached. Here's how many people clicked on the link to go to your restaurant. So it gives you some really specific particulars. And I also think like anything else, I mean, listen, I used to work for a newspaper and I sold advertising. And our rule of thumb was you really had to do a 3-month campaign because people have to see repetitive messages. And frankly, most of the time, you just want to stay top of mind so that when people are making that purchasing decision, they think about you. So your friend that owned a garage door company, right? Like how many times do you need to replace your garage door?
Right.
Not very often, but when you do, you want to think of him.
Right.
So in his business, it's more, you don't have those repeat customers every month like you do if you're a restaurant. So, he just needs to have his business stay top of mind, and continue to, have good quality work so that he gets that word of mouth referral. So social media is just kind of a way for him to, connect to. So, maybe he only advertises when he's got, a new, there's some fabulous new technology that's coming out.
Sure.
And then, there might be people who are like, ooh, I want to upgrade to that. I've been thinking about it. There is a crack in my door and I'd like to upgrade to that
Sure.
wireless technology, So I think there are certain times when it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I talked to him about it most recently, that was the feedback I gave, is as long as you can measure the effectiveness, give it a shot. You can try these different things, because I've been surprised, like I said, about which platforms have had payoff for us versus others. And so, you just go learn.
Well, and so here's the other thing that we haven't talked about, right? So far the conversation has been all about how can I talk about me. Well, I think the thing that most people don't appreciate about social media is that it really gives you a direct connection to your consumer that no other platform gives you. So you can instantly communicate and have feedback, so you could say, hey, I'm thinking about launching a new service. What do you guys think about this? And you can get immediate feedback from your customers about, is this something that they would buy or not? How do they feel about this price point? Is this something they would buy? So
Sure.
I think it's, and it also is a great customer service tool. So it allows you to address problems, criticisms, concerns immediately, which
Right.
is, especially important being in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
So for, restaurants, again, we work with a lot of restaurants, and it's been a very effective tool to communicate, the very rapidly changing rules that happen, right? So,
Sure.
are you doing curbside? Can you do alcohol to go?
Yeah.
Are you doing in-restaurant dining, or is it just on the patio?
Yeah.
Here's our new menu, or our hours have changed. Well, we were doing 10%, now we can do 25. So it's changing so rapidly that it's a really effective way to communicate and answer people's questions, because things are happening so quickly now. People can't keep up. They're like, are we allowed to eat inside?
Yeah.
And you can, so
You're right.
you can immediately respond to that person who wants to come into dinner tonight.
Yeah. You're right. It was just maybe within the last 3 weeks where, my wife and I were headed out with the kids someplace, and we were trying to figure out where to go. We'll check Facebook and see if they're even available so we've gotten to the point where we're going to some of these places for information, because we're used to the companies using it to communicate.
So the bad part about that for a business owner is that customers now realize that social media is where they can go to get immediate information, which means they also expect a timely response. So you can't post about something on a Friday and just say, well, I'm taking off for the weekend, I'll come back Monday. If people leave you a question, if they send you a direct mail, if they comment on a post, they expect a timely response. And so if you're going to commit to social media, you really also have to commit to paying attention to the channels, and that means after 5 o'clock, and it means on the weekends, and it means on a holiday. If you're selling, you need to be ready to answer and respond to people who are purchasing.
Yeah, which is ultimately why we pared back to just a couple, because otherwise you just can't keep up with the content, because it is the expectation. And there will be people out there with plenty of things to say, that's for sure. And that's a good thing. I think it's a great way to get feedback pretty quickly from whoever your consumer is, right? That's good. Let's see what else I have here. Let's maybe talk a little bit about trends, and any trends that you guys observe that are happening, certainly right now with COVID, or anything else beyond that.
Well, I think one of the trends that we are seeing is an increase in the use of video. So it speaks to the rise of TikTok, which are just short little video snippets, which has then now trickled over into Instagram, rolling out Reels. Which is their way of combating TikTok.
Right.
So, video has been on the rise for a while, because there's only so much you can convey with a flat photograph. So video really allows you to say more, to engage more, to connect more. And so, we saw it, probably 5 or 6 years ago, you saw more people going from just blogging to YouTube and vlogging, which then led to, then when podcasts came on, a lot of people record them so they're live on YouTube as well as audio for podcasts. So video has become a really important medium, all the way from long form interviews like this down to little 15-second Instagram stories, because it just allows you to show and relay so much more information than a photograph.
Okay.
So that's definitely a trend, and one that that I think is probably here to stay. And it's just, again, playing around with the technology. They've made it super easy to create kind of fun and engaging little videos. Most of my friends are saying that their teenagers are teaching them how to do TikTok and
Right.
Instagram Reels.
Right.
So, help comes from many unexpected places, and sometimes your children can actually be helpful.
Yes. My experience, even in the engineering world, is that it's the younger generation behind us that are doing most of the innovation anyway, so it's probably not inconsistent. Shouldn't be a surprise that our kids are teaching us these things as well, right? And I lean on my own daughter for a lot of this type of stuff as well. She's way better at it than I am. Any big common mistakes that you see businesses make in the social media space that you can talk to?
I think the most common mistake that we see people make is that they utilize social media the same way they would old school advertising, like a billboard or a magazine ad. They think it's just, I'm putting my message out here and I'm walking away. I'm posting and I'm going back to what I was doing. And what they don't understand is that social media is a two-way street. It's not a place for you to lift up your megaphone and shout out your message and then leave the room. People are there because they want to connect and they want to engage. And so that's how you're going to build brand loyalty and build an audience on social media. So it's recognizing that social media it's a different conversation. That's what people want to have, is a conversation about your brand or your service. It's a place where they can ask questions. It's a place where they can have their voice heard, and it's where and it's why it's so valuable, because it allows you to create those brand ambassadors who will then help you by going out and spreading the word on your behalf. So it's word of mouth on steroids.
Yeah, very much. That kind of gets me into the more complicated, more detailed technical questions, which I think will segue into eventually, what happens when this becomes too much, and then someone's growing and they need somebody and they want to outsource this, which is where we're in our conversation. But before we get to that, are there days that are better than others to post? Are there times that are better than others to post? And how much should a business owner or anyone who, especially small businesses that manage this themselves, how much of that should they care about?
The great thing about technology today is that Google knows all. And so all you have to do is go to Google and type in best times for a restaurant to post on Instagram. And there are many articles and infographics that will come up giving you sort of varying, timelines and opinions.
Right.
The thing about it is that all of these platforms give you insights. There's literally a button. It's called Insights, and you push it, and it shows you, here's how your traffic is flowing. Here's when your audience is active. And so after a while, you can see, I'm getting most of my engagement between the hours of noon and 8 p.m., so don't post at 8 o'clock in the morning, because if you're a bar, your customers are still in bed. Yeah. So, it's that information is available to you. And it's not overly difficult to figure out, when between noon and 8 should you post? I mean, I think that I don't think that you have to get so granular there. Sure. I think as long as you can sort of narrow it down to that sort of overall window, right, you're good.
Get it close and then look at your own data. And I think paying attention to the data is important. That's what I've observed, at least, is I did all this research on what day to post what. And in some cases, it's clear that it definitely makes a difference. There are days that are better than others. But ultimately, looking at your data, I find to be more valuable, because you may be in these weird niche spots where
okay, this is restaurant data, but that's different for garage
Right.
door, right? So each one's going to be a little bit different.
Well, and I think it's just really a lot of it boils down to common sense. So if your target customer are mothers, common sense. When do mothers have time to be on Facebook? It's probably after 9 o'clock when they've dropped the kids off, and it's before they've got to go out to lunch, or, so it's like either post in the morning, or that once the kids come home at 3:30, they're going to be busy with homework, they're making dinner, then the kids start doing their thing. So after 7:30, probably better than 4 p.m.
Yeah.
So, some of it is just common sense.
Sure.
Think about how your customer, how a typical day probably moves for them, and it's not so hard to figure out. I'm much more a believer in quality over quantity. So I would say to people, I would rather you post once a week and have it be a meaningful message that has been thoughtfully crafted with a great visual than to post junk every day.
Yeah, so
just because you feel like you have to pump something out.
Yeah, and that goes to my next question, which is when you talk about a really great visual, is it better to have a picture of people, things? Are there certain colors that are better than others?
I think that totally depends on the brand. Again, if I'm an interior designer, your pictures better be flawless, because that is what you are selling. You are selling me beauty and perfection.
Yeah.
If you're, so I think it just depends on what you're doing. I don't think they have to be professional images. Today iPhones give us the opportunity to take really great shots on our own, which is, not good for my photography friends, but there are things that they can do that are more editorial and specialized that we'll never be able to do on an iPhone. But for the most part, even you can take great shots. So I think it's just paying attention. Even if you're doing it yourself, just make it good lighting, good. If something's good or not, and if it's not good, it's take a class. You can go down to the Apple store and take a class on how to take great iPhone videos for free. So it's just really investing the time or to read a couple articles to educate yourself, and practice makes perfect.
Okay. That gets into my next question, which what does someone do when they get to the point where they go, I don't have time for this? And, if they're growing and they've been growing and it gets to the point where, all right, this is more than I can handle. Because there are folks who have internal, even small companies. I was interviewing someone, I guess it's been about 2 months ago, that they have one person, I think, dedicated some percentage of their time, and they are in charge of all social media for their business. But for some people, they may not have that capability, and they may need to outsource this.
Well, I think one of the biggest mistakes we see is when people get to that point, they say, well, I gave social media to my intern or the college kid that works for me part-time because, they're young and so they should be good on social media. It's like you wouldn't do that with your accounting. Marketing, just because you like social media doesn't mean you know anything about how to market a business on social media. So when you get to the point, I think, where you, a lot of people, even if you enjoy posting personally, doesn't mean that you will enjoy it for your business. When it becomes a job, it takes a lot of the fun out of it.
Right.
And social media can be really fun, but it can also be a grind. And so that's when a lot of people are like, I have some clients who, they just want to post and they want us to do all the back end stuff. They're like, I enjoy doing it, but I just want to post it and walk away. And so I want you doing all the engagement and all the follow up and all the come behind me and add hashtags. I want to have the vision, and I know what I want to say, and I know how I want it to look. So sometimes we have that. And then sometimes we have clients who are like, I hate social media. I don't want to do it. I don't want any part of it. Or they just know that they're not good at it.
Yeah.
Just because you are great at your business doesn't mean you're great at marketing your business.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think it's just everybody is different. And
Sure.
I think, an agency can do as much or as little from a support standpoint as you need them to. So really, anytime we meet with a client, it's not like, well, here's option A and here's option B. It's really like, tell us where you are.
Give our listeners some idea of what kind of services that you guys offer.
So Gangway Advertising is a lifestyle firm. So we work with what I call the fun stuff, which is restaurants, bars, travel, fashion, beauty. We also work with a lot of nonprofits in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So that's what we personally do. And when I say we're a full service agency, that means we do everything from logo design, branding, development, websites, to public relations, keeping you in the media, social media management, influencer outreach. So we really are a wraparound services. So if you were opening a restaurant, we could do everything from help you come up with a name, a logo, design your website, the t-shirts you want your staff to have, the banners you're going to put on the front, the advertisements you want to place in the magazine, set up your social channels. I mean, we really do it all. And then we help guide you as you're developing and communicating that message. So we can do a little or we can do a lot.
Excellent. Yeah. I wish you would do mine for free. But maybe we'll get to a point where there's some value to it. And because to me, it's not something I fall into the bucket of, I would like to not spend time on this. But at the same time, you have to. It's super important. It's for the reasons you mentioned. Just looking at how you can zoom in on your audience, it's pretty difficult to ignore.
Well, like I said, I come from a newspaper background, and it used to always amaze me the people that would spend $1 million to open a concept and then tell me they had zero budget to market it. And it's like it shocks me how people just have that build it and they will come mentality. I think is it's foolish and it's detrimental to your success, because I don't care what kind of business you have, what kind of product, what kind of service, there are 100 other people probably within 5 miles of you doing exactly the same thing.
Right.
And so how are you going to rise above the noise? How are you going to stay top of mind? How are you going to communicate that you're better, different? You have to market to your consumers because too many other people are. And if you're not staying top of mind, you're just going to be lost in the shuffle and forgotten.
I don't know how many times we've seen it in the tech industry where someone has a better mousetrap, but it's in a closet and no one knows. And if it's not,
if a tree falls in the forest,
right.
Does anyone hear it?
Well, the mousetrap's not making any revenue in a closet. I can tell you that much. If you want to be successful with it, you've got to get it out there. And if you don't, somebody with an inferior one's still going to beat you, right? Because they're marketing it in a way that you're not, right? So it's super important. It's at least, and a lot of people who are innovating and having really good ideas like this are not necessarily good marketing folks. So
well, and this is also one of the things that we as an agency stress is really pairing a public relations strategy with your social media management. Because again, it's like if you walk into a party and you're meeting new people and you're talking about yourself the whole time, people are going to be like, man, that guy didn't even ask me about me. Like, what a narcissist. Like, what a jerk. So you can't just go on social media and think you're just going to talk about me, and that's what's going to engage with people. So by having a public relations strategy, our job is to get you, like, let's use you as an example, right? If you hired me as your publicist, my job would be to get articles written about you, to get you on television, talking about, what are the trends in podcasting? What are you doing that's differently? Just shining a light on who you are, what you're doing. And then those are all things that you can utilize on your social media. So you're like, hey, I'm not saying I have the greatest podcast ever. Good Morning Texas said it, and D Magazine said it, and the Dallas Morning News said that I was an expert in podcasting.
Right.
And so it's having those sort of traditional journalistic outlets give you credibility. It then allows you to bring in a different voice and to show that, yes, you are good at what you do and you are an expert in your field and you do have a great product because it's being featured by credible media sources and you have other influencers talking about it and wanting to partner and be a part of what you're doing. And so there's just kind of a joint strategy with what we do in that regard to sort of helping you create content for your social media.
Yeah, and I think it's really, to me, surrounding yourself with people who are strong in areas where you're maybe not. And maybe you're really good at this, people listening, but a lot of times my experience with people who are really good at business innovation are not necessarily good in this area and are oftentimes not the best at marketing themselves or marketing their work. So I think it does make sense, and it If you're not paying attention to social media marketing and you're running a business, I'm shocked. What are you doing? I think it definitely, hopefully you're listening to this and it makes you think twice about it and at least gives you the thought to go dip your toe in the water and play around with it and see what you learn. Any final tips that you'd give to small business folks out there in terms of leveraging social media?
Well, I think the biggest tip is just don't be afraid to give it a try. These platforms are free. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And so, start your channels, play around with it, have fun with it, see what works for you. And wouldn't it be a great problem to have that you grow your business to a point where you have to look at outsourcing this kind of thing, right?
Absolutely.
That means you're doing something right.
That's a good problem to have.
So yeah, just like at some point you'll outsource accounting and outsource, other aspects of your business, marketing is something that at a certain point it just makes sense to bring in a professional to help take you to the next level.
Yep. Cynthia, thank you for taking the time to share the feedback and the insights with folks. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
If you are to the point where you are looking for a professional to handle your social media for you, check out Gangway Advertising and see what they have to offer.
Or at least you learn something new and go poke around on Google and see what the best days are to post for your business. And go, if you've never done any advertising here, go give it a shot. We've done it a couple of times for the podcast. It's pretty powerful. It's crazy easy.
And it's crazy cheap.
Have a good week, folks.